Leah Hextall is Manitoba born and raised, and she's also the first woman to call play-by-play in the NHL. We could not be happier that she decided to join us on the show. Welcome to this week's episode of Beers and Beauties.
Doesn't matter if you got Coors, Busch, Bud Light, or a local shop's IPA. All beers are welcome at Beers and Beauties, baby. Let's go.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Beauties Sports. If this is your first episode here, my name is Alicia Cowis, and everyone, well, really outside of my family, calls me Cowie. And I have the pleasure of being joined today by the one, the only Manitoba born and raised Leah Hextall. Leah, how are you?
I'm first of all, really excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here.
The Cowie. R.I.P. Addie. I'm not quite sure where she is, but
She's
we
at
adore
hockey
her.
practice.
Is that where she is? She's at hockey practice. But no, I'm just excited to be here on the Beauties podcast.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it's so thrilling.
It felt like it took us a while to get our shit together.
It really did.
Okay. I don't know when we started that conversation.
It didn't feel like that. We just were like, oh yeah, here, no, yeah. But that's what happens when, everybody's busy in the world, right?
Yes, exactly. So no, thank you for being here. For those of you listening, if this is your first podcast, thanks for being here, first and foremost. First things first, if you can, one thing that really helps us on the pod is going over and giving us a rate and review. That's the best way to share the episode. If there's something that resonates with you today that you think someone else in the world would enjoy, make sure to send that over to them. You can find us on Instagram at Beauties Sports Talk, Addie at Addie Miles Abbott, me at Cowie14, and Leah, what's your IG?
I'm very creative at Leah Hextall.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Keep it simple.
For the win. So we're going to get into a few things today. First things first, I do want to talk about where the heck Leah Hextall comes from and how the heck Leah Hextall ends up on TV. So rewind me back. We kind of grew up in the same neck of the woods.
Westman area.
Yeah, yep. You're a Brandon girl. I'm a Souris girl. I remember Leah Hextall from when I was in grade 10. So remind me back to the start of your career at CKX.
Yeah, that's exactly where it started and where probably was the first time you would have ever seen this mug on the television. I started my career at CKX in Brandon, which unfortunately no longer exists, as so many small TV stations don't across the country. It was 2003. I was 23 years of age. And, I'll never forget it. It was, October 30th. I remember the date when I walked through the doors, and I remember thinking the night before, I'm about to start my career. It felt very adult. But for me, I grew up, I say I'm from Brandon. I was born in Portage, lived there till I was about 4, and then moved up to Flin Flon, Manitoba. My dad worked for Manitoba Hydro. My mom was a nurse, and he could get a full-time opportunity up there, good job. And my mom was the head nurse of the emergency room there. And so we grew up there, and I couldn't have asked for a better place to grow up because just lakes and fishing and camping and great sport and just a wonderful northern community. If you don't know northern Manitoba, it's going to be one of the best trips you do. It's stunning. We were just up there with my family fishing this summer, so it was delightful to get back up there. And then, my parents very quickly were like, this is a little too isolated for our daughters. I have an older sister, Lindsay, and we both played a lot of sports growing up. And we were starting to get that point, especially in our ball, where we were making provincial teams. Yeah. So you're, 10 hours from Winnipeg. And of course, we know Winnipeg's the center of the universe and everybody outside it has to drive in.
So true.
They moved down to Brandon. My dad got a good opportunity here and we moved to Brandon, and I moved there when I was 11. So I consider Brandon home because all my developmental years, my high school years, but most importantly, my mom is there, my sister's there, and all of my incredible high school friends that I am still very close with are there. So it's home. As soon as I drive into Brandon, it's just home. I think it always will be.
Yeah, that's a weird thing. And I don't think, people who grew up in the city here, my wife grew up in the city here, and it's a weird thing. Like when I leave the perimeter, she says, oh, you breathe easier. I'm like, it's true. And no matter how long you're gone, I moved away from Souris when I was 17. I'm 34. Yeah. That's half my life ago.
I know.
And it still feels like home.
Yeah. And so that's why it was such a gift for me. I went to school in Vancouver because, quite frankly, Red River did not let me into the program. I'm not bitter about that at all. Like they asked me to come and speak to their kids and I still say no to this day.
Yeah.
And I do it with love. But, you hold on to that stuff. You remember, right?
No kidding.
And so I went out to school in Vancouver, which was the best thing for me because I had grown up in Manitoba and, it was my first time living alone, all those type of things. I had to pay my own little hydro bill and all those kind of things. And it was great for me. And I went out to a broadcasting school there. And when I would come home, I would go to CKX television and I would connect with the news director and I'd take in my VHS tape because that's what it was. And I would have examples of my work from stories I did and radio hits I did and, just anchoring at my school desk. And I would go in and show the news director. And thankfully I did that because they had an opening and they called me and said, are you interested in it? And interviewed for it, got it. I made $680 every 2 weeks.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. This is the glamorous life of television that everybody wants to be in, apparently.
Yeah.
But, I started in Brandon, and what I was saying is it's such a gift because I knew what was important to the Westman area because we weren't just Brandon. We covered all of Westman. And I was saying to you, like, when you said you're from Souris, I'm like, okay, I've been in every high school and rink around Manitoba through my nearly decade of covering sports here early in my career. And it was such a gift because not only did I understand what was important, I knew how to pronounce all the teams, all the towns. And you don't realize until you go work in a place like I did, like Boston, where you find out that Worcester is Worcester. And all these things that are spelt the way that a Canadian would pronounce them is not how you say them.
Yep.
So just understanding that was such a gift. And at CKX, I did everything. Like besides being a camera operator, I had to produce my own shows. I edited my own packs. I wrote my own highlight reels. Like everything had to be done because it's a small station. So you wear every hat. So I was there for 2.5 years. It was so good for me, but I was definitely ready to leave.
Yeah.
And then I went on to CTV in Winnipeg, and I was there for 7 years and started covering the Manitoba Moose. So that was my next progression from covering junior, the Brandon Wheat Kings and the Manitoba Junior Hockey League and, those type of leagues and AAA midget and all of it. Then went to Moose for the AHL. And then, my final year in Winnipeg is when the Jets came back. And I covered that story. I was in the room the day that the commissioner and Mark Chipman were there. And I remember having to hold it together, like not to cry because I was never a Jets fan growing up because my cousin played for the Philadelphia Flyers. So that's why. But I just knew how important it was to putting this province back on the map. And I say province because it's not just Winnipeg's team. And I think it's really important for people outside in the hockey world. I always say that to them. It's the Winnipeg Jets, but it's Manitoba's team because so much of the outside community supports this team in order for it to survive here.
Yep.
And I'll never forget that. And and then right after that, headed to Boston. And that was probably the biggest break of my career, working for the New England Sports Network down there, known as Nesson. And we are the Red Sox and Bruins rights holders. So suddenly I was interviewing Tom Brady.
What a fun sports market.
Right? It's the best. Yeah. It's all they do is win there, and they're so competitive, and you cannot fake it there. Their fans will know, and they will call you on it quickly. So it was a shock to the system in so many ways, living in a different country, all those different things. But that was the big break. And, then just from there, working at Hockey Night and Sportsnet and that whole kerfuffle that happened. But I've rambled on too long about my little career progression, but that's pretty much how I got on it. And that's where it started, was all in Brandon. And it was just simply that I went to university, thought I was going to be a lawyer, hated every second of university, and took time off to work, realized I did not want to just work a job that you just get a paycheck for. My parents always said, do something you love. And I put together my athletics, which were so important to me.
Yeah.
And then I was, really into drama and plays and musicals. And also I was the kid who entered public speaking competitions.
Very cool.
That was me.
Yeah.
So, I just married them, and it was very clear that this is what I'm going to do.
This is my path.
This is it.
And I think it's funny because you say, I rambled on. And so if we want to fast forward, there's a few little bumps and bruises in there. But that's what makes us who we are.
It's why I'm doing what I do now.
Exactly. And so fast forward for everyone who's listening. If you don't know, if you've been living under a rock and you haven't heard of what Leah is doing now, Leah is the first woman to do play-by-play in the NHL on a national broadcast on a full-time basis. And when I say some bumps and bruises along the way, there were, but I think it's interesting to hear you, which we don't get to hear often, is to hear you rattle off all of the experience. And one of the things so Leah recently did a presentation, or earlier this year did a presentation for the coaches site, and it garnered a lot of publicity, and rightfully so, because, I think the title of that was, I'm Not One of the Boys, right?
Not one of the boys, you got it.
Yeah, and it is, I always say when you are given a stage that you need to use it, and not enough people have the courage to do that. So thank you for having the courage to do it, for one. But two, anyone who's spent time on social media has heard and seen people, for lack of a better term, shit on you for your entry into play-by-play, this uncharted territory as a female voice in the NHL. And people have also said that, maybe you aren't, and you've used those words. Maybe I'm not the most qualified, and maybe you aren't. But your resume, you just rattled it off for people.
There is no question mark in my brain how qualified I am as a broadcaster. I have worked for every major network in North America.
Yep.
I have been doing this for nearly 20 years. And I have been let go from a job, not been able to find a job in my industry, and reinvented myself in the play-by-play role and pivoted and stepped out for 4 years and had to, work a completely different career. And on my weekends, just drive around to small towns and call games to myself and record them just to get this going. So I'm very aware of how qualified I am as a broadcaster. I would put my resume and the things that I have covered. I have covered every level of hockey from Timbits up to a Stanley Cup to a World Cup of hockey with ESPN back in 2016. And, I'm very confident in owning my capabilities when it comes to being a broadcaster. I know that today you could have somebody pull me in and say, Leah, we need you to come host this right now. And I could do it because I have that much experience. And that happens to anyone when they have a certain amount of time in their profession. Obviously, with the play-by-play, it is a relatively new skill for me. And it's something that I have to work on every single day. But I've never shied away from the fact that I'm not as strong as those who have been doing it for 20 years, but nor are my play-by-play counterparts strong as me in when I'm in my reporting role, because I've been doing that for 20 years.
That's right.
So it's all about stepping into a new space that has not been traditionally occupied by a female, or in this case, never, and putting myself out there to make the mistakes. And I always say when I step into the booth, 3 things are going to happen. I know I'm going to make a mistake, which I'm going to learn from, which in turn makes me better. So every game that occurs, and it's going to continue to occur.
Yeah.
But there is no other way for me to do this because there was no system. There was no feeder system for me to jump into. And a lot of that stems from the fact that we do not have female professional leagues. And that's where I would have been able to go and develop. And not just me. The first time AGMs that we have, the first time coaches we have, if we had more opportunities in female professional leagues or just leagues in general, then we would have more opportunities to be the qualified candidate when the opportunity arises and work through a feeder system. I have been jumped in to the largest network in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've said that on previous, whether that's speaking engagements or when in the publication in The Athletic, in that when you compare what you had to do, when you compare being the first, that ceiling breaker that steps into this role. And just so you know, I am just as sick as you are of hearing that, of these women that are breaking
I try
barriers.
not to roll my eyes because I know it's important, but it's so funny how now I just don't want to hear it anymore. And that is such a bad attitude. And I try to separate that, but I'm so at the point where I just want it to be Leah's calling the game. And I don't want that to be before my name. And my sister has even said, well, suck it up, Sugar Cup, because it's always going to be, and you should be proud of that because no one else is going to have that. And I get that, but I just am really at the point where, when are we going to stop hearing that? And I know we're so far away from it. Yeah.
That is the hard part, is that I think about, so Addie and I have talked about on past episodes, you go to those career fairs and it's like, whatever, the same old things, teacher, nurse, you can be, an electrician, da-da-da-da-da. And from a governing body of sports, I spent time in a multitude. I played fastball, I played hockey, I played volleyball, I played basketball, you name it. I do think that there is a concerted effort that we need from our governing bodies of our youth athletics programs, because we do them a disservice in terms of opening their eyes to the opportunities that lie within sports. Whether that be in refereeing, whether that be in coaching, whether that be in broadcasting, whether that be in the health and fitness side of that, whether that be in the mental side of that, all of those things allow you to stay involved in sports.
The PR side of it, the communication side of it, the social media side of it. There's so many opportunity in athletics and sports at a professional level for, anyone, but specifically for females. And that was one of the things I spoke to, and why when I spoke at the Coaches Site conference, it is coaches, and many of them are grassroots coaches, and that's where it has to begin. And I often see governing bodies put out a tweet saying, here's a female mentorship coaching program. That isn't enough. There isn't enough intent in that. And what I mean by that is I don't think, and this is with no ill intent, I don't think that they understand that as women, we are raised that if we don't check every single box for a qualification, we won't put our hand up and say, I want that position or job or opportunity. Whereas little boys are raised differently. And, there's studies done that a woman has to have 99% of the job qualifications before she'll apply, and a man can have 50%, and he feels that he's the most qualified person for the job and will go for it. And that has something to do with the way we are raised societal. We were talking about the fact that I'm a decade older than you. And I thought, well, perhaps this is starting to go away because maybe women are going to, I was seeing younger women. I thought, look at how fierce those little girls are. I love it. But listening to you and Addie last week on the podcast, talking about the competition and learning to win, it's very clear that no, we are still playing safe. We are still being raised to get the gold star and to not rock the boat or make noise. And so what has to happen, and this is what I spoke to, is I was afraid to even tell anybody I wanted to try to do play-by-play, because who am I to think that I can do this? There's the imposter syndrome of I didn't play the game. I know it, but do I really know enough about it? Do I have the skill set to do it? What makes me think that with no other women doing it, that I can be the first to do it, and there's no playbook to it? So you really had to find, or I did have to find, someone I trust. That goes the same way with our governing bodies when they put out these programs. Yes, there are programs, but I guarantee they're not being filled. Because first of all, a woman may think, well, yeah, I have interest in that and I'd love to do it, but me, so there's that. And then the second is how they arrange it. We have to remember that women still have the onus on them for childcare. Many of these women are mothers who might get involved. Even if you're not, I'm not a mother, you're not a mother, but we all have busy lives. We all have careers. And so how are you creating these programs? Does it match the lifestyle for females? And those are things that have to be started to think of. There needs to be intent in the process. And male coaches who are, coaching females, God love them for it, because we need coaches and we need good coaches. But if you see a player who you think, hey, there's some skills there and a love of the game, why not invite that player to come to one of your meetings with the rest of the coaches? Just getting them involved early. But there has to be an intent in the process. And we are not doing the right job yet. And I think there needs to be a look at, how we create these programs. Who are we really creating them for? Let's not just do it because we know we have to. Let's do it properly.
Yeah, I agree, because it does often feel like we're just doing it to check the box. And I've said this before too. So my wife Ashley coaches in the U18 AAA league, and so does Addie. They're opposing coaches actually this year. And Ashley has coached the provincial team. I think this year is her 5th time. She was an assistant coach a couple of times. She's in Hockey Canada's women's master coach developer program. She's been part of the NHLCA's female coaches development program. All of these things that she's done. And one of the things that I feel, and this is personal opinion for me, is that, like, you think about, you probably didn't play hockey because there was no girls hockey.
There wasn't where I grew up.
Right. I'm 10 years younger than you, and I played boys hockey. So we are just now getting to a generation of women who are women that are professionals, that probably have kids entering into the sport, or have kids that are at an age where now they can start to volunteer and give back. We've got enough women who are coming back from college and things like that, that I really want to believe that we're at a point where we have enough women that we can start to make that change. Because that to me is the key, is that when you look at our board of directors, like, let's just talk about Hockey Manitoba specifically. When you look at that, it is men. It is men and one female VP. A VP of female hockey, period. And so I do want to encourage people who are listening, and myself included, and I sometimes have to swallow that a little bit and say, I have tended to leave that level of commitment to hockey to my wife, where I have a voice and a different thought process than she does as a coach every day. And so should I be, and do I need to hold myself accountable and go and give back to a game that like helped me grow up, that I love dearly, in that next step of going onto a board and volunteering in a way that goes in with the intent that the programs that we create are with purpose and are implemented beyond just the creation. Because a lot of the times, man, we create it and then all of a sudden it just ends up in the trash.
And I think what you just mentioned about, you know, the hockey world, the world in general, is ran by men. And every position I've ever had as a broadcaster, I've been hired by a man. And I'm very happy he did. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. I appreciate you for it. And what I've spoke to is that none of this can be done without our male colleagues.
That's right.
They have to actually be the drivers because they are still in the position of power.
Yep.
We are not. So that is why in my job with ESPN, and, you know, ESPN as the worldwide leader in sport, it takes a lot of crap.
Yep.
Because when you're the top, everybody wants to shoot you down.
Yeah.
And so the audience is always coming at ESPN just in general on a lot of things. But, you know, I give them such credit, you know, my boss, Mark Gross and Mike McQuaid, because the fact is when I approached them when they got the hockey rights and I said, listen, I've been a ringside reporter for you guys at the World Cup of Hockey. I know that's what your interest is in, but here's the thing. And I had called the NCAA tournament for them twice and they were, you know, first woman to do that. They, you know, gave me that opportunity, which I was not ready for, but gave me experience to become a better play-by-play. And I had just come off calling a 5 overtime game between UND and the University of Minnesota Duluth in the regional in Fargo in 2021. And when you can call 8 periods of hockey, 7 hours of broadcast, that was the first time I ever said to myself, Leah, you're a play-by-play. You can do this. So when I called him, I said, yeah, if you guys will have me, I'd love to come be a ringside reporter for you. But here's the thing, I'm a play-by-play and I want a hybrid position. If you guys are willing to take the swing, so am I. And there was so much of ESPN having to get back into the NHL for all of this to fall into place because I knew they were progressive enough to do this because I had seen other women call play-by-play in different sports. Maybe not necessarily on a full-time basis in pro sports, but I just felt this could be the moment. And, you know, a week later, he called me and said, you're going to have a contract delivered to your agent. This is what it is. And it's your hybrid role. So it's one, asking for your opportunity, which we don't do enough as women. True. It's saying, this is what I want to do to make sure that people understand this is what I'm looking for and being clear and having intent in that. But then it's ESPN as a company to say, listen, it's been over 100 years of the NHL and this has never happened. If it's going to happen, we have someone here that has the potential and a background in broadcast, has been getting more experience and has covered hockey for nearly 20 years. This is the moment.
Are we going to find it?
So they made it happen. And then it's up to me to do the work. And so, you know, when you look at companies like that have the ability to think that way, to understand that, yes, she isn't the most qualified play-by-play that we could select, but this is something missing within not only the sport, but as our company as broadcasters. And hey, everybody, guess what I just learned at my ESPN NHL seminar? Our viewership by women is up 51%. It is the sport that is growing the most. Cool. So to have someone that looks like them, sounds like them is important. ESPN recognizes that. And so therefore, I just think that that's where, you know, I have 2 men who believed in me, once again, who opened that door. So without the leaders who are still men working with us to move the needle forward, we will not get there. And that's why it has to be a partnership. And that's why our leaders, our male leaders, need to start thinking in that direction. It's not so much about who's the most qualified candidate anymore, but look at the experience, look at the potential, and think about what that will happen with an opportunity.
I think that, and this is something that Addie and I have talked a lot about sports being the vehicle of the messaging of this podcast, right? It just so happens to be sports. But realistically, I live, and that was one of my text messages to you, is like the amount of relatable words you said in that coach's site presentation, for me personally, it was like uncanny how much I felt, okay, yeah, I've lived the same story. It's just not in sports, right? I work in agriculture. I've said to you, I sit at a table with men. And again, same way for you that you say it, is that I couldn't be more grateful for having men with intent who believe in Alicia and the work that she's put in to afford me the opportunities that I've had. And then going beyond that, I think about now, like I said, where we've got these kids. I've got a niece, and now I've got two, one little baby one. Seeing them and affording them the ability to see. I know you got shitty stuff coming through your social media, but you've got to have good stuff too, right?
Absolutely. And, and that's so important because that's the why.
Yeah.
And I will never forget, and that's what I gravitate to, is that I had a father who sent me a picture of his little girl who's probably 6 years of age with these Coke bottle glasses, and she's looking at the television and I'm on it. And he said to me, my daughter pointed at you and said, Dad, it's a girl.
Yeah.
And, a 70-year-old colonel from Brandon writing me a letter, not an email, writing me a letter.
Very cool.
And just stating that I've never heard a female call a hockey game, but boy, did I enjoy it. And did I have to say, I never thought about a woman calling a hockey game. Also giving me some constructive criticism, which I do appreciate in the right way.
Yeah, when it's actually constructive criticism.
And it just, and women who tell me that they called up their little boys because I was calling a Jets game last season to say, hey, you're going to sit down and watch this with mom and listen. And there's just going to be this whole generation, when I keep going in this realm, that it will no longer be Leah, the woman play-by-play. It will just be Leah the way it is, Bob or John. So that is the goal. And so I have to hang on to the why. It's not for the first time in my career. Yes, I want to be successful. I have massive goals. I've had massive goals my whole life. It's innately built in me, the way I was raised, being a Hextall. It's in my DNA. I'm extremely competitive. This field is extremely competitive. I have come back from the dirt many times in my job and my field. And I have big goals. They're lofty goals. And I don't look like yes, I will achieve this. That is the way I'm built. It may not happen, but that's just the way I'm built. But those are individual successes. There is a great big other piece to this puzzle now for me, and it is the representation of my gender. And in that representation, it is my responsibility to not be one of the boys. And that's why I called my presentation that. I spent a great deal of my career trying to fit in, trying to be one of the boys. When I first started, I was the only female in the room. There's so many women now in broadcast, but we all, don't make yourself notice. Don't, just do the job, keep your head down, fit in. Even the way I sometimes speak when I'm around men, the stories I will tell, the way I kind of laugh at jokes that are not very funny. And you're doing it to fit in, to be part of the team, to be one of the boys, because all you do is work with men, especially now that I'm back in play-by-play. And what I realized this year at the rink is, just the way in which I was treated. I'm not one of the boys. I'm female, and it is noticed every time I step into a room, and it really is now because I'm a lone woman doing it. And everyone has their opinion about me, and I had a coach not know I was standing behind him and just sewer me this season during playoffs to one of my teammates. And I thought, the gall of you to do that to one of my teammates. I wasn't even thinking about myself. I thought, how inappropriate, because how uncomfortable for him. And there's other people that I really respect who are around who heard it. And everybody was just kind of like, and
did anyone say anything?
No one said anything.
Yeah. See,
and there is a discussion to be had there. And I actually received a couple men after saying I should have said something. But, being not one of the boys, like the responsibility as a female now is to understand that I am female. I have a female voice. It does not sound manly. I have a higher octave, so I'm going to talk the way I'm supposed to talk and sound the way I'm going to sound. That doesn't mean that I don't have work to do on cadence and tone and telling a story with my voice, and play-by-play the way the greats do, but that's going to come through repetition. It's also my job, my responsibility to look female, be female in the way that I present myself as a female, which is different for everyone. For me, I wear a lot of dresses to the rink. I'm not a suit girl. I do have some great suits. Don't get me wrong. I work very, very, I love my fashion, but you know, I'm a believer in that. And, you know, I just want to be female. I want my uniqueness to be there because that is the whole point. It is having the representation in the role of someone who sounds and looks like a woman to another woman who is watching the game, and not just women, but also men watching the game, executives in the NHL watching the game, executives at networks, players, coaches, everyone to be like, yes, I am female.
Yeah.
Get over it. And I sound this way, and I'm going to continue to sound this way. But the reason it sounds different is because you're comparing me to men, because that's all you've ever heard.
Yeah.
And I had such a great example of this. I was calling the Jets, and I had two games a week apart. So I call the game, and there's tons of opinions out there. No. But then the second time I called it, literally 6 days later, I couldn't have gotten that much better. So many comments on social were like, oh, she's doing so much better this time.
Oh, no, you're just used to it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I wanted so badly to respond because I just was like, do you not understand that?
Yeah.
When you talk about my voice, that is sexist.
Yep.
Because what you're doing is basically saying she doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Why don't I sound right? Because I don't sound like a man.
Yep.
And I'm not saying I have we were just talking, love your voice. I'd kill for it. I have a higher register, but it's not like I'm shrill. It's not like I'm screaming. No. I know men who lose their minds when goals happen.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I'm very aware to keep it in the box because I'm female and I don't want to, annoy anybody with my shrill voice. But it was so telling to me, and that, people, and I'm like, no, you're just used to it. So I understand that it's going to take years.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting to understand that. And the thing about it is I don't know when the next female is going to come, because it's not just about women deciding to do it, which, first of all, let's put it plain. This isn't easy.
No.
Like, doing play-by-play is the hardest thing we can do as a broadcaster, especially in hockey because of the speed. So just to do it and to be able to hold my own, I know that I'm a strong broadcaster, but I do have so much work to do in the skill. So first of all, for other women who want to get into it, you have to do it and earn, the stripes and the ability to do it. And then just with everything that I'm going through and, the way that I've had to mentally prepare for the last couple months to go back into the sewer next week. Opening night is Tuesday. I'll be in LA. And that's fantastic. I've never done an opening night. And I'm doing an opening night between the benches in LA. And then I'll get on a plane and go to Nashville. My first call will be between the Stars and the Preds 2 days later. And I am gearing myself up. Like, I'm working with a mental skills coach this year. And it is specifically to get me in a place where I am prepared for everything that's going to come at me.
Yeah, to combat the shit that you should never have to deal with.
Yeah. And, all the mentions are off, but people still find you. The things that people think they can say is atrocious. And people can say, just don't think about it. But it's like,
it's not possible.
It's not possible. It's not. And, I think what shocked me the most is how I was attacked. Like I mentioned, the coach who said something about me with me right there. I had an ex-ref attack me on social media. And when you have people in the brethren attacking you, that's even more personal.
Yeah.
Because you can have your opinion about me, absolutely, all day long. But I have my opinion about you, and I'm never disrespectful about it.
Yep.
And to see that they are willing to do that, it just showed me where we are.
I also think that I don't think they're opinions. I would honestly almost offer that I don't think they're opinions. They are just a blind judgment. And I think there's a difference between those two. I can have my opinion, and I could text you and be constructively critical and say, hey, Leah, when you're, I think that whatever it is, I think that you're too repetitive in how you use whatever phrase. Just something I noticed today, and it was only today, so just be aware. That's my opinion of how I heard you call a game, and I can offer you constructive criticism in that way. Me just saying, I don't want to listen to this, I think you're garbage, that's just judgment. That's not an opinion.
It's not a bad point. It's a very fair point. And I think that's what's so interesting to me is when I do receive, the comments that are made, what always makes me laugh is there's not anyone in my industry that doesn't receive comments like this. So
totally.
by no means am I sitting here being like, oh, I'm the only one. It's not about that. And I do watch myself. I was very nervous about coming out to talk about it even when I did my presentation, Not One of the Boys, because you don't want to complain.
Yep.
You know, as a woman, I'm just lucky to be here. I don't want to complain. Like seriously, there still is that. And so I didn't want it to come across that way. So I put up examples so that people could see it's always you suck because and you got the job because you're a woman.
Yep.
You suck, but because you have tits, you have this job.
Yep.
There was always something following it. So there was always something there with my gender that showed me that this isn't just about my skill set. This is about me being female. And to deal with that when all you're trying to do is go do your job that you love, that you're trying to get better in. And people have no idea how much work I put into this.
I would challenge people. I'm just sorry to interrupt you here, but I want people, all of you, lots of the people that listen to this podcast are hockey fans. And I don't care if you're at your 6-year-old son or daughter's game. Think about it in your head even, where it's a super safe space because no one can freaking hear you. And call that game. I've done it. Knowing that you were coming on here, I muted a game. Sat in my basement like a crazy person, not in a rink like a crazy person, but felt like a crazy person even in my own basement. Calling a game, how hard it is. I would challenge all of you to do it. It is.
I was just, I'm getting ready for, the season. So I was, I said to you, it'll be more 7:30 tonight because I was doing a practice call. So right now that's what I do off my TV screen. I have a game and I put it in and I call it. And there's so many things I'm trying to think about, okay, vocabulary, tone, cadence, pacing, economy of words, breathing, because my throat starts to hurt because I'm pushing from my throat because I'm not breathing from my diaphragm. It's just too much. It's almost like, so, when I practice, I try to break it down and I say, okay, let's start working on getting these phrases into your vocabulary because the more repetition. And sadly, what people have to understand is I've called 25 games. I'll do 25 to 30 this year again. And the only way for me to get better is repetition. That's the bottom line, and doing the work. The prep is what's there. We're such a result-driven society, and what I'm working with my mental skills coach is getting away from that and understanding that it's the process of preparation, which we all know. I understand that if I'm not prepared, I'm not going to do well. But really breaking down the preparation to be like, what actually, fleshing this out, is the important part. Do the hard and important things first, Leah, and then going to the next stages and really fleshing it out so that I can understand that. I think last season, there was a big part of me that I felt very unprepared going into a lot of different games. Like I wasn't quite there. And there's a reason for that. So let's examine it. Because it's not just about showing up and doing it. The preparation, if that isn't there, I'm dead in the water from the moment go when the red light comes on.
What is the preparation?
So my process right now, and it's changed this year. First of all, I didn't do enough work last year. I can be the first to say it. I hold myself to very high standards, and it's not out of laziness last year, but I just think the bandwidth. It was so new, and the travel was intense because most of my games are Western Conference. So coming from Winnipeg, it's never an easy trip. It's always a connection. So every travel day is like 8 to 10 hours. So I was traveling every week for the first time in my life. I was doing play-by-play on a national network, consistently for the first time in my life. I was relearning the league because, as I mentioned, for 4 years, I was talking Jets, but I wasn't, covering the league like I had at Sportsnet and Hockey Night. So it was getting to know the players, the teams, the coaches. Every time I worked with people, it was a new company. So every time I worked, every game, new people, new analysts, new stats guy, new producer, new rinks. I was a studio person. So just knowing where to go to get into the rink every morning when you're going to game skate. Like these were all things I had to learn last year. It was like the first day of school every time. So when I would get home, I just felt exhausted. So I didn't do a lot of practice calling last year in between games. I would rarely watch my games. I would do it here and there. And so this year, the process has changed a lot. You know, like I said, do the hard and important things. So for me, every day begins with the 3 N's, which are names, numbers, and nuggets. So, you know, the name and number of the player, you got to know that by heart. That's your lifeblood as a play-by-play. But then the nuggets. So, you know, I'm getting ready for Dallas and Nashville, my first game. So, you know, Joe Pavelski, leading scorer for the Stars last year, 81 points, top in power play, 25, 17th year in the league, 13 with San Jose, reigniting with, you know, Pete DeBoer. So those are my nuggets. You know, so every player, I got to have that. And I have to be able to recall it just like that. So I start my day like that. And then I go call a period. So I'll go call, I have a game right now, an old, you know, game of Dallas and Nashville. Some of the players are a little different because they make moves in the off season, but most of it is good. So it's identifying the players, working on vocabulary, all those things I spoke of. And then it's sitting down after that and probably going for a workout just for my mental health to clear out my brain. But then when you get home, it's back at it. It's now, okay, so now I've got to read. I got to go check in training camp, look at the videos, look at any media they did. I've got to check on the league because when we're doing games, we talk about other things that are in the league. We talk about the next team they're playing. So every day is that. And so it's, you know, it needs to be that. And then I'll practice another period in the evening after I've had some relief from it. And that's going to be my process this year. And even on my travel days, when I'm traveling there, it's a full out work day. Just, you know, like I said, the 3 N's and, you know, and then there's watching the teams, because that's one of the best ways to, you know, you need to be up with what they did during the week before you called them. And that's all that prep. And then you go call that team. And then you got to turn around and you're doing 2 different teams. That's the beauty and the curse of being national. You know, it's not like a regional job, which, you know, I can't wait to have a regional job one day. You know, to have one team always be the same, you know, but there's so many benefits of being national because, you know, listen, you're bopping in and you're covering the league on such a scope, and you do playoffs and you do the cup, you know, so that's the exciting part about being national. So that's the process. So as soon as I'm done that, it's done and dusted. And on my travel day home, I will reflect on my game. I will list things that I thought went well that didn't. Then I'll go watch it to actually see if what my brain is telling me is what actually happened. So watch the game. And then, you know, I go home, and on my flight home, I am looking to my next 2 teams and starting my 3 N's. And that's it. Like, and it doesn't stop. And there are no off days. There can't be this year. I can't take a step this year. I have to take a leap. That's my own goal on myself. No one at ESPN is telling me that. But I am aware that it's okay for me to come out and say, yes, I wasn't the most qualified candidate to get hired. It is not okay to hang my freaking hat on that. That is something I don't want to say anymore. I want by the end of the season to take such a leap that I'm standing my ground in there, and there's less talk and less feeling that, well, you know, she's still new at this. I want people to go, oh, how long has she been doing this? Like, you know, a decade? That's where I want to be. And that's going to take a ton of work, and we'll see if I can get there. But, you know, I'm a big believer that, you know, hard work will outwork talent if talent doesn't work. You know, it's what I used in my athletic career, because I played all sorts of sports, but I was never, you know, the best athlete. I had a lot of athletic ability in me. I was coachable. And that's how I feel about my play-by-play. I have ability. I'm coachable. I listen to the feedback I get from the people in the arena, which is very important to concentrate on. My bosses, my mentors, people that understand the skill to get better. And, you know, we'll see, but it's just a beast. It is a beast of a position, and it's so much harder than when I was a host and reporter, because you just have to know everything, because, you know, I have to know how many people fit into a rink. So if we start talking about a sellout crowd doing the wave, I know how many people are there. I have to know the trainers. I have to know the doctors, in case, you know, I learned this from, I'll never forget. I was watching a game and Chris Cuthbert was calling it, and John Tavares got injured. And I believe it was against Montreal. And the doctor came out for Toronto, but then the doctor also came out for Montreal. And, you know, this is no hit on Chris, but I could tell, just because I know, that they were scrambling in the booth. Okay, who's Montreal's doctor? Because they call the Leafs a lot, but they weren't sure who Montreal's doctor was. And suddenly this person's on the ice and has become the star of the show for the moment. And that's the thing. The game is a star, and it's going to dictate to you. So no matter how much prep I just talked about, that game is going to show things to me that I'm like, okay, all right, where are we going now? And just throw things at you. So you just have to know so much. And that's what I love about it. That's what I love about it, is how hard it is.
The challenge. I thrive on that too. And I think it's incredibly important for us to be sure to share the effort and the time and the energy, because as we said, you're the only woman doing it. And quite honestly, in my experience, and I've watched sports for my whole life, I've never heard anyone tell me what it means to be a play-by-play broadcaster. And I think that's important. That I don't care if you're man or woman, you know, girl or boy, child, adult, listening to this, to have an appreciation for the effort, the time, the energy that goes into this, the things that the nuggets, that wasn't nugget. That was like 16 nuggets.
Well, Pavelski touches the puck a lot. And the thing what people have to understand is I don't want to say every little thing that's going on the ice, because you can see it.
Yeah.
So a big part of my job is, yes, identifying. So Pavelski on the puck. But as he's skating through the neutral zone, first of all, either I'm just not going to talk, and learning to not be afraid of the silence is something that Joe Buck said. And it's such a big thing.
Yeah.
Because you feel like it's been dead air for like ever. And it hasn't been. And letting it breathe and all these things I'm still learning to do, because your instinct is to fill the void with sound, and the sound is your voice. But when you hear people who call every single thing, it's probably because they've come from the radio world. And it's also because that was stylistically, for probably since time, the way in which play-by-plays did it.
Yeah.
That's not what networks want anymore. They want you, with all the net sound we have, with all the technology we have, they want you to back off.
Wow.
So there are, you know, obviously you're not going to just sit there and be like, not say anything. But, you know, in the offensive zone, but it's enough just to say, Yossi at the point, to Duchesne, returns it. Down to Forsberg, shoot, scores.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. That's where my bosses are trying to get me.
Yeah.
I can do it here with you right now. Oh, when I'm doing a game, I'm like, Roman Yossi, walking the line, sets it down. You know, and I'm talking so much. And when I was practicing today, I'm like, Hextall, shut up.
Yeah.
Like, less is more.
Yeah.
And so it's the style of play-by-play, the way at least ESPN is going towards, is it's less. So that's what economy of words is a big thing in my reality going into this season. Yeah, so this is probably very boring for, you know, a lot of people, but this is my little world.
I don't think it is. I think it's fascinating because, like I say, it is a curtain we never get to go behind.
Yeah, I think, so I hope that if people are listening to it, not for my purpose, but, you know, if you're listening to a Jets broadcast and we have a new voice in Dan, and he's taking over from big shoes from Dennis, and, you know, I just think, you know, give him time, get used to his style before you form, you know, I know you said, I don't think these are opinions, but, you know, give him time, because he's great at what he does.
Yeah,
everybody's great at what they do. If you are calling in the NHL, you are great at what you do. You can like different broadcasters better. I have broadcasters that I prefer to listen to over others, of course. Yeah. But everybody who's made it here, trust me, you don't just get thrown into this at this level.
Yeah, that's right. And I don't want to, I think it is, I'm going to stand behind my opinion and judgment, where you said, give them time. If you afford someone time, that becomes an opinion. You've done your due diligence.
Yes, exactly. You have a base. Yes, snap
reactionary. Judgment. Oh, I don't want to listen to it because it's different. It's not Dennis Beck. That's a judgment.
Yeah, I had, you know, it's amazing to me just how quickly people do make up opinions. You know, there was a very well-known ex-hockey player who on his Instagram put up, you know, a call of mine in my second game of the season, and was like, "What am I listening to?" So I sent him a note and said, "You're listening to a female play-by-play, and that's my voice."
Yeah.
And we have the same agent. So him and I had a little chat, and it was a great chat. It was a great chat. And, you know, I kind of said to him, like, here's the thing. Yep. That's my second game. How good were you in your second game in the NHL?
Yep. Oh, I know.
You know, and you just kind of, and they stop to think a bit, and they're like, I didn't realize. And I'm like, and I guess it's different to you.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
And the tough part is, I know I'm sure you're afforded at least enough rope to defend yourself if you need to, but it's an endless battle that you can't start to fight.
You can't. And I pick and choose my spots. It's the only time this year where I responded was when I had an ex-ref go at me on Twitter. And it was actually when I was in the reporting role. And I'm not even going to give him, saying his name. But that's the only time I ever responded actually on the format, on the platform of Twitter, so people could see it, because he questioned my preparation, and that's questioning my integrity. You guys just heard how I prep. Same thing goes for reporting. I'm ready. So that was the only time I've ever done it. And I only said one comment because I knew after that there'd be a ton more, but I'm like, you just can't go at it. You're never going to win. You're never going to win. And you have to understand that social media is not everything. Unfortunately, there are some broadcast companies who really look at social media and make their decisions upon it. There's one in Canada that does that, you know, that I've worked with before. And you know, who knows if I'll work with them again. But, you know, it's just interesting to me that that can mean so much because I mean, I'm on Twitter, and when I hear something great, I don't necessarily go out and say, hey, I really liked that. So it's a certain person who decides to go on the platform. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that, you know, I don't have the time to be doing that either. So it's very interesting to me, that mentality. So I try to remember that and not hold it too close to my heart, because I would rock around like I'd be devastated. And, you know, and I was devastated my first 2 games of this season before I turned my notifications off. I had just finished a game and I saw what was online, and I was trending on Twitter, not for a good reason. And I reached out to someone who's in the NHL, and I said, you know, maybe this isn't for me. You know, that's where I was after just 2 games, because my mental state was that bad. And he said to me, I said, I just don't feel good. And he said, can I be honest with you? And I said, of course. And he said, no one gives a fuck how you feel. He said, as you know, if a player comes to me and says, you know, well, I would like more ice time, or I should be getting that ice time, I don't care if you feel that way. It's what are you going to do to gain that ice time? So when he said that to me, it was a big moment for me, because I thought, yeah, nobody does care if I don't feel good. What am I going to do to get better?
Okay, so question for you, because I think that you are clearly very capable of looking back at a season. I guess 2-part question. What do you think was your biggest improvement last season, and what is your goal for improvement in this upcoming season?
That's a very good question. I think my biggest improvement was just the fact that I classify myself as an NHL play-by-play. Before the season started, I wouldn't have said that. I knew I was going to go do NHL games. But there's a difference between doing a game and feeling like this is what I do. And it really hit me on International Women's Day this year. I was calling a game in Detroit with Dominic Moore, who is just a gracious gem, intelligent man who I adore and has been so wonderful to work with and be a partner with in the booth. And, you know, it was the anniversary of my first NHL call back in 2020. We did it on March 8th for Sportsnet. It was an all-female cast. It was one of those, but it was still important. But it was the first time a woman had called an NHL game on national television. And it was me. It was my voice. And I looked at it and thought, that's 2020. This is 2022. And I'm standing here not doing it as a one-off. I work for ESPN, and this is my job. So it really hit me there that is progress. That is progress right there. So I am an NHL play-by-play. So I think it's not necessarily an improvement, but to have that mentality, especially going into my second season.
No, it is a freaking improvement.
I think that is definitely something. Going into this year, it is all about the call, and it's all about improving in the little things. The details. So that's it. I know that I can talk hockey, and I know this league, and I can recite to you so many things, and I know the history of the league, and I have integrity in that, and I have all that. I need to improve in the little details and really put the prep in to make sure that, you know, those things improve on an incremental level throughout the season. So by the end of the year, it is in the result, which is the performance.
Okay, I love that. I love that answer. I think we've both used the word intent. I use the word intent a lot on this podcast. You've used the word intent a lot.
It's a new word for me too. It's from this year. It really came into me where I thought, wow, like the intent. Not only in positive things, but in negative things is what I really learned. What is the intent behind this?
Yeah. And I think that you go about, or my very quick judgment, I'm going to now say it's an opinion. No. I'm going to say is that you do things in your life and in your career with intent, which I think is extraordinarily purposeful. I think that's how we move forward, is with intent. So my question to you, we've talked about, obviously Hockey Canada is in a state of disarray right now. Governing bodies and different things, people doing things with intent. From a broadcast community, and maybe it's not a community in the same way that I think about the sport of hockey. I think about the sport of hockey in that I can play against someone my entire life, and at this point in my life, meet them and we're buddies. Because you're united by the culture that is hockey. That's right, because you're just beauties.
Yep.
Is the broadcasting, again, maybe twofold, is the broadcasting community a community in that way, or is it very segmented based on the where you lie? And then the second part of that is, do you think that the broadcasting community, or maybe it's certain networks, are doing enough things with enough intent when it comes to expanding diversity in their broadcasters?
When it comes to us broadcasters as a brethren, it is a very, very competitive field with very limited positions.
Okay.
So there are times when I feel, and I own this, I have not been great to especially other women. And when I say great, I mean not warm.
Okay.
And basically because as women, you guys just look at any broadcast. If you watch a hockey game, there's the women host, there's the women sideline reporter for almost every sport.
Yep.
That's where you see us. So there's literally 2 jobs to be had.
Yep.
Or you're an anchor.
Yep.
So when you're in that category, okay, if she's up, like this is who's going to be up for it. This is who's got the qualifications. So there's sometimes a lack of warmth between us. But what I did learn this year is how many men supported me.
Okay, cool.
Way more men than women. I heard from way more men than women. I heard from some amazing women. It does not mean that there was other women out there who silently weren't like, she's doing it and cheering me on. But the amount of men I did not know, who I have never met, who are other broadcasters that I thought, I cannot believe they even know my name, that just sent me notes and reached out to me and just said, keep going, and others who would get on and say, she's excellent.
Yeah.
And that's the opinion. Mm-hmm. So I do think that there is a community out there, and a community that really saw what I'm trying to do and knows how hard it is.
Yeah.
And so I did feel a lot of support from many broadcasters, writers, all that kind of world that cover sports in general.
Yeah.
And especially when my speech came out, I had a lot of people reach out to me, Ray Ferraro being one of them, who has been so amazing. Mm-hmm. I think that's an effective one. He's just a great man, but he's also married to a great woman in Cami Granato. One of the best. So, and he was, the first analyst when I went to do a game. We were doing our first game together, and he said, hey, let's go for dinner. That meant so much to feel included. Yep. He wanted to go to dinner with me. He knows people in every city, people he's played with, people, family, friends, and he wanted to take the time to go for dinner so we could talk. Yeah. And we had a great conversation. Yeah. And then we called 2 games together, one of them being the best game I've ever called, to this day, the best game I called. And then this summer, when he read the article in The Athletic and watched the presentation, and, just my speaking about not hiring the most qualified candidate, but having this separate set of qualifications and just needing the opportunity, he said, that's Cami. Cami is an assistant general manager for the Vancouver Canucks. She's a trailblazer in her own right. She's one of the greatest female players, if not, definitely the greatest American to play the game. Yep. And he's like, that's Cami. Yep. And what you said about how do you gain the experience when there's no opportunity, like these are things that he had never thought about in that way. Mm. And this is a very evolved gentleman already. So and he said to me, how can I help? Yeah. What can I do? Yeah. Just those words. Like I almost started to cry when he said them to me because I said, that helps.
Yeah.
that helps, just you offering. And he said, as far as I'm concerned, ESPN needs to put the pedal down with you. You need as many games as they can possibly give you. And, obviously they can only give me so many because there's all sorts of factors in that. But he's like, because this is it. Like, this is what we're doing. He's on the train. He's on the Leah Hextall train. Yeah. And he's like, this is what we're doing. And I've got games with him in the first half of the season. I've got more games in the first half of the season than I did all season with him last year. And in my own little brain, and I don't know if he'll ever tell me, I feel like there was a call to ESPN and him saying, when I can, because he's on the first team, he has to do our big games. He's our top analyst. But I just kind of feel like there was some intent by him to be like, put me with her.
Cool.
And that he's just, and that's the type of thing. And he wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
John Forsland of the Seattle Kraken had a beer with me and said, you can't quit because you're making an impact. Yeah. Just hearing that from someone, that's great. So there's a lot of great men in the hockey world. Mark Recchi reached out to me, just so many great people that just reach out and say, keep going. Yeah. Just keep going.
Yeah. And this kind of highlights the fact that I continually say on episode after episode is when you're given a stage, big or small, use it. Mm-hmm. And that would then be my challenge. Not that many of these men may ever listen to this podcast, but if they do, back to the point of someone saying something to you and no one's saying anything in front of them, that's a stage. That's a small stage, but it's a stage and you still need to use that stage.
Yeah. And it's, and it's interesting to see them think about it post.
Yeah.
Because in the moment, it was so uncomfortable. Like, I could have said something. Yeah. I could have. So is the onus not on me? So there's no blame, but goodness, what it would have felt like to have somebody stand up for me in that moment. It would have meant the world. And, and I've really battled about when I see this coach this season, do I ask for a moment and say, that was unacceptable behavior and disrespectful to me. Yeah. And going forward, I hope that you don't treat anyone, gender.
That's right. Doesn't matter.
Not included.
Human aside.
Yes. Yeah. Because we were in our professional space and it made it very hard for me to do my job that night. And it still makes it hard for me to do my job when I'm around you.
To come back here. So
I've battled with that. I've battled with, hey, do I take this coach aside? Because sometimes it's those moments that teach and change people.
Yeah, it is. You're very correct. And I think in saying that that's a hard thing to swallow. Like, it's one thing to be challenged to do your job. And I think your job, we've clearly articulated that it's not easy. I don't want it.
You do in some ways.
I do.
Just not in others.
Yeah. And it's funny as you've been talking, this is like digress, but as you've been talking, I've in my head been thinking, if I was 7, 10, 15, 17, 21.
You would be doing this.
I would do this.
If you would have seen someone doing it.
I would do it.
Absolutely, you would have been Cowie. I totally believe that.
Yeah. I would have done exactly this. Because a lot of times in my life, I've thought, like, that's why this podcast is so freaking fun to me.
Yeah.
We're in my basement, let's be honest.
But the setup is just unreal.
It's not the worst.
No, I'm so impressed. And I'm a broadcaster. I see a lot of stuff. I'm so impressed with you guys right now.
I do think that if I could rewind, that I would be. Yeah. I would be in your shoes.
And so now we know that there are young women who are just going to see me doing it and now know that you're able to. I have to say, there was a young lady who I spoke with before I got my job at ESPN, but I was calling the women's game. And these 3 broadcast students wanted to interview me for an assignment. So we got on a Zoom and they recorded it and they asked me their questions and they were fabulous. And after the presentation athletic article came out, one of them reached out to me. And she said, I have just signed on, and I won't say the university because I don't want to give away who it is, to call the women's hockey team this season. Yeah. She said, I did not know that was a possibility until I spoke to you.
Yeah. It's so
like that is, it just crushed me in the best way. Yeah. I just was like, first of all, congratulations to you for getting this opportunity and kill it and work and whatever you need, let me know. But just that's enough. That's just that one woman who is now doing a job that she did not know was possible to her because she spoke to me and saw me doing it.
Yep. Yeah. And I think, like, I know people can be critical of the term and it probably gets overused if you can't be what you can't see. It is true.
Oh, it's 100% true. Representation does matter on every level.
It matters. I don't care. And again, it goes back to, and you've said it in the past, where if you don't feel like if you feel like you're giving me a favor because I'm a woman, it's because you've never been in these shoes. You've never been on the other side of this, where you've not been afforded an opportunity.
You've never known that it wasn't possible to you.
That's right.
And that's, you don't want to call out certain people, but there's a certain class and a certain gender that has had every door. If they want to walk through it, they know that that's possible to them. There is a whole group of us that do not. Yeah. Because we've never seen it. Yeah.
And I think about, this flashes me to the PWHPA and the PHF. The PWHPA, a group of women, I know you were calling the CWHL, as that folded. And
I've called the Dream Gap Tour as well.
And as you were, you're looking to get into play-by-play, you're afforded an opportunity to CWHL folds. PWHPA, all of these incredible women coming together to do it. That's exactly the example to me, is that it's really not about them. Similar. Most in that you have to, I've said this early before we hit the red button came on. You have to continue to do it because it freaking matters. And the PWHPA, the women that are involved in the PWHPA that are striving to have a league, and I'll ask you what your thoughts on women's hockey are shortly here. That's why they're doing it. Most of them are my age. Lots of them are my age.
Most of them will not see the fruits of their labor. No. They will not play in a professional women's league that has the right infrastructure. I'm so going to make a noise.
I did
here.
it earlier while you were talking.
There we go. I figure if we're going to get into women's hockey, then I better get a new cocktail. But and that's the truth. And I have so much admiration for them because, to your point, we have the best player in the world in probably the history of the game, in the women's game, in Marie-Philippe Poulin. It's not a contest. Anybody you talk to, even if you talk to Hayley Wickenheiser, who the first time I ever interviewed her, I was working the Women's Worlds here in Winnipeg for TSN. I was a rinkside reporter. I was terrified. I've never been, I've interviewed Wayne Gretzky. I've interviewed some very big names in my career, even at that point. Yeah. Oh, goodness, I was nervous. I just wanted her to think I was smart because she's Hayley Wickenheiser. Yeah. She meant so much to me because growing up, that was the female representation of, women in hockey. Yep. She was doing it. She went over and played men's in Europe and whatnot, and she couldn't have been better. And her and I have gone back and forth a few times over social media, and she's I'll just go be a doctor, and then I'll also have these roles with the Toronto Maple Leafs. It makes what I'm doing this big. Yep. But it's just incredible. But that's what I mean. Marie-Philippe Poulin, she's, let's fingers crossed for us we get another Olympics out of her, which I think we're going to get, because she's, I think, come out and said she'd like to play one more Olympics. But the chances of a professional league being ready by then, likely not. And in my opinion, which I think is a strong one, and she's never going to see it, and it breaks my heart. But so many of these women, to your point, the Hillary Knights of the world, the Sarah Nurses, Natalie Spooner, they've just been building it, and they know they have to build it, and they're doing it. Cassie Campbell-Pascal has been building it. Yep. Jana Hefford has been building it more than anyone for so many years. And, they are never going to get to play in it, but they just want it. Yeah. They just want it for what's to come. Yeah. And that is the greatest gift and the greatest legacy, I believe, that you can give. Yeah. Oh my God. I feel like we could chat for 7 hours. I know. I'm sorry. This has been, we're just, we're rambling on, and I know. It's okay. I do have a few, you guys can cut a bunch of this out anyway, so. We won't. Please do. No. Please make me sound smart. There's probably times when there's what? Yeah, you know what? Probably the listeners say that about me every week, and we cut nothing. No, you guys do such a good job. And I shouldn't say you guys. I hate that when people say you guys. But, it's interesting to me. I listen to it every week, and I had it brought forth to me by shout out to my friend Krista Moffat. And she said, you need to go on this podcast. Yeah. She was the first person to say that. And it was before you and I had ever connected. So I started listening and subscribed. And I just love that you talk about women's sport, because it's a guilt that I live with, that all of my energy is on men's sport. Yeah. All of it. And it has to be, because it's just a beast of a job. And, and all my attention's on hockey. Like, I don't get to watch football. I don't get to watch baseball. I don't get to watch anything. I just live in this hockey world. But here you guys are doing it. You said from your basement, who cares? You're doing it every week. People don't understand how much work this is. I totally do. You have a wonderful setup and you're doing it. And you're talking about women's sport when so many people do not focus on it. And I love it.
Yeah.
I've learned so much from both of you about who I should be paying attention to.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for that. Because I think that, there's a lot of intent that goes into this podcast for sure. And, it's funny you say, and I think that's like the glory of being a sports fan for me. Like, before you got here, I was watching the Yankees play to see if, and it did happen that Aaron Judge.
He did, eh?
He hit his 60-second bomb of the year, and now he's the new AL. It's a 61-year-old record. And he is the AL single regular season home run leader in 62 home runs. And so I've been a sports fan my entire life. And this just felt like the natural progression of that, where, like I say, being an adult and wanting to be impactful and having intent in all of the things that I do in my personal life and my professional life, this felt, and Addie's the same way. And the cool thing is that you just get to hang out with your buddy. So she sits in your chair and we talk on a weekly basis. But I do think that sometimes it does go unnoticed in the fact that, like, we have to plan every week and we also have our own lives. Okay, Leah Hextall, I consider you a friend. I am so grateful for you, my friend, for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. This was such a blast. And I've talked your ear off and I hope your audience got something out of it. And it's just, I'm so glad we got to do this and it's a thrill and I hope we get to do it again.
Yeah, I can't wait to listen to you. I will be the person that gives you constructive feedback.
I hope so.
And I honestly, I can't wait to have you back here. Hopefully we can do it on a regular basis. And maybe that's just some, short segments of whatever's going on in the world. But I very, very much appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, whoever you are listening, shouldn't gender that. Humans, your human ears. I appreciate you for being here. If you haven't already, we are going to put in the show notes of this episode Leah's presentation, not one of the boys, from her coach's site presentation earlier this year. I encourage you to do that. Just so you know, there are some vulgar words in there, but they're a very real world experience of what Leah has lived. And I think it's important for you and your friends and everyone that you want to share that with to hear it, because it is sharing the hard stories that makes a difference in this world. So thank you for doing that, my friend.
Well, I appreciate it. And I just very quickly, so thankful to the coach's site for giving me the platform at the conference. And then after hearing me speak, saying this needs to be heard by everyone and putting their weight behind it and, making it what it was. And Aaron Wilbur and his team are just incredible. And they are moving the hockey culture in the right direction.
Amazing. Use your stage when you get one, my friend.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Leah Hextall, once again, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you.
Okay, thanks so much, everybody. If you, like we said earlier at the top of the show, the best way to share this podcast is leave a rate or review. Find us on Instagram at 5 stars. 5 stars only. I always joke about that. Do you think that's allowed?
It's true. 5 stars only.
Yeah. We got some less than 5 stars.
Uber drivers say that to me when I get out of the car. So why can't you guys say it?
Yeah, we said some hard things once on the podcast, and I think we had a few people who tuned into one episode and left us a 1-star review, but everyone else has been 5 stars. So 5 stars only. And thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this with a friend. Find us on Instagram at Beauties Sports Desk. You can find Addie at Addie Miles Abbott, me at Cowie14, and you can find my lovely friend Leah Hextall at Leah Hextall on Instagram. Thanks so much. We'll see you again next week.